Okay, g'day. Now, yesterday we discussed the foundation stone. We started to look at who you were in international law, because what I see from everybody is that you only seem to care about who they are. And in this process of only pulling apart who they are, you don't really look at who you are. And if you can't define two sides here, then you are them. There is no division. You can't define yourself, so how can you be outside of them, and how can you say that they have done something wrong? We look at the legislation, and when you think from the inside, you obviously argue with the government that's attacking you, but you don't correlate that it's not your government and why it's attacking you. So this diminished right that we discussed, and how locally, so local is federal, whereas the people of the states, so it wasn't the states that united, it was the people that united into a Commonwealth. This is why you were to take an oath through God, to honour God and that Bible, and not the Bible per se, the creation that was instructed out of that Bible, this Commonwealth and that foundation stone that was forged out of the blood in battle, defending a border. So the Bible isn't a rule book per se. I mean, it is. You can walk into a courtroom and use it, of course. But to comprehend what it forms and creates at international law affords you the open doors. So, to look here, I said that you were warded to the state. So, you registered with the state for a birth certificate. Now, in the old days, only the poor did this, or the disabled, increpid, aged. They turned to the state. If you look further back in time, the state was responsible for the lunatic asylums and the prisons. And the church was responsible for the poor. So we see this link in history where the state steps in where someone isn't self-determined enough to do it for themselves, which is why I speak about executing the affairs of your own estate, which is similar to executing the affairs of state for a nation. So that the Bible set out as stately structures, e-stately structures, of which you as a family, father and your children, your wife, are an estate managed by you, the father, and the co-executor, the wife. You are, in fact, an estate. And this is the diminished right. So when we look now at being a ward of this state, we can see that it starts at the council. The council came in over 1989 was the big year where they started to push all of your local councils out and amalgamate and turn into super councils, and in some smaller cases just push your councils out and replace them with corporate offices. And this is a land abeyance happening that started in 1967-ish, 1973, where they started to come in and the bank started to take the title of the properties in your local areas. And the bank now owns everything. So with the council, you live in a council ward, looked after by a warden. So if that's not demonstrative enough, I don't know what is. And then when you look at that council ward, you have councillors. And then when you look at the council business, the actual business side of this, and this can be demonstrated when you look at certain things throughout Australia that have been acquired by government over the years, and you look at the land title that exists underneath them. Right, so when you look at this, you can start to see what council actually is. And an excellent description of this is a silo in Darwin in the Northern Territory, which was used by a lady for a climbing centre for the last 25 years. But before that, it was an oil silo that was used to maintain ships that came into Darwin Harbour during World War II. This oil silo was taken, the land on which the oil silo is built, was taken from a family that built a home there. So that family also has a history, interesting one. But the block of land itself, in the land title, which has now had a 10th land title holder. So through that history of land title, you can see what's going on with the council in Darwin. And this would be the same across Australia. So the block of land is actually in the allotted town of Darwin. Okay, which is then divided into lot numbers. The town of Darwin then has a title holder over the block of land called the City of Darwin. So the City of Darwin is basically the bank holding title to the land and then releasing the land out to you. So when you now look at the documentation inside a council, so typically you would have a Lord Mayor in a biblical lineage, and when we discussed in the previous video that stone, we can see that a line of authority is framed very specifically. So the Attorney General, avoiding these questions on rule of law, relates to that line of authority. That goes down all the way to the Lord in your local district. And that Lord has taken a back seat to the corporate side of council. And this can be demonstrated by land agreement documents used by the Darwin City Council Corporation, demonstrating that they are in usufruct of the town of Darwin. You can also see in these documents that instead of the Lord Mayor using a royal seal in lineage to your Anzac, the Lord Mayor becomes witness to the corporate documents instead of the seal himself. So now you have, in many cases, a general manager, but in most cases a CEO, a chief executive officer for the council, who signs off on the commercial business of council. So he's signing off, acting on behalf of the bank, because he's the corporate side of council. And when he's given the primary signatory in a document and uses a commercial seal for the City of Darwin Corporation, which is a land title holder inside the town of Darwin, something's amiss. A corporation or entity not of the Lord Mayor is maintaining and controlling the Lord Mayor. So this now has something to do with why your rights have been diminished. Because district by district, the financial side of your city's bankrupted. It's district by district that you used to be citizens. You used to be citizens of the city or the town in which you were a juror member. That's why council exists and the Lord of your district. So you used to go down a lineage back to your Anzac. And now you don't. So you use the state registered person to interact with the council, who then charges you rates to live on land that it itself is a title holder of under your system. What's the technical term is a tenant in usufruct. So they became administrator under the rules of usufruct and took abeyance of title. So the bank took all title, and then released the bank out to you, the people. Torrens title. So you get fee simple in the bank, not in the Crown. This is an unusual thing which can be directly demonstrated by the use of a seal of your district council. It's easily demonstrated by documents that I can show you relative to the Darwin City Council and that silo. So, abeyance of land is an interesting thing to look at, given that the councils are the ones that hold you as ward. So if the Lord Mayor is in a suppressed position, what does that say of your citizen role relative to the district that you're in? Now, if you were to go and look at the incorporation of the City of Sydney, which happened 100 years ago, you'll see that the city itself held the citizen's role. And if you inquire with Sydney, you will find out that they surrendered that citizen's role in 1974 to Australia. Australia not being the Commonwealth of Australia, demonstrated by the use of two great seals, making them distinctly two entities at law. This is what people are ignoring. So, for you, being in this suppressed state, diminished rights status for you, and not being able to execute the affairs of your own estate, and then the Lord being in a suppressed position to the CEO through a banking cartel, might have something to do with the money that you're using locally between each other, and the fact that your local council is the thing that's actually financially suffering. All you need to do is look at the city of Detroit in America, which has gone through a triple bankruptcy. So you can see that the city itself is an entity at law. It's an estate. And it had all of you as beneficiaries to this estate in a dual society. They used to do rubbish and all the rest of it, parks and gardens, etc. And now it's turned into a bankers' controlled system where they've taken title abeyance. So you can see when we talk about an executive-controlled foreign estate being inside your executive branch of government, the effect that flows down from that is relative to what started locally going up. You, the people, started relying on the Reserve Bank, and the government remained silent because under the martial law it had no obligation to tell you to save your own asses. So it watched you fall into demise, and now it sits in a position of control. And biblically, Luke 15 talks about citizenship and how you became a citizen to a foreign power. And Luke 15 talks about the inheritance left by your Anzac and how you dishonour and are disloyal to it. And then when you look at international law, that backs up everything said and demonstrates what happens when you are disloyal. You suffer the burdens of warfare. So you end up suffering the burdens of financial burden, the police giving you tickets on the highway, committing an act of highway robbery under your law, but they don't operate under your law because they're working for the same bank that's demonstrated to operate through your council. So you basically have a full administrator, and I'm about to run out of batteries, which is a shame, but you basically have a full administrator. And that is part and parcel as to the reason why you've got a diminished right due to the lack of finance in your country. So it's a twofold problem. You being poor has led to you being incompetent at managing the affairs of your own household, the estate, through an office of executor. But at the same time, being poor has caused your nation to go under administration. And that started with your local district councils. So the answer, difficult answer, because the Bible told you very clearly, this is not about the law. This is about all of the families in your district standing up together. Because it's your trust in God. God left you the beneficial interest, and you have every right to return to this indissoluble federal Commonwealth, which is defined through that line of authority to that foundation. So this government, wanting to become a republic or not, can't stop that foundation. And once that foundation is returned to, any lease signed by an administrator can be nulled and voided because it's only an administrator. It's not the de jure government. And if anybody wants to question whether we lost our sovereignty, your previous Prime Minister, Malcolm Fraser, has actually made public comment in the fact that we need to return to our sovereignty. So, in that vein, if you're questioning what I'm saying, please do. Look a little bit deeper, because what you're going to find is an active usufruct means that you lost your sovereignty and you became tenants to a foreigner in your own land. As a Commonwealth, you lost the inheritance given to you by your Anzac by taking the handout of citizenship from a foreign power. And that's a bit hard to swallow, but your diminished right should demonstrate this. The police acting the way they do should demonstrate this. The Parliament building a fence around itself should demonstrate this. There are so many things going on around you. Anti-terrorism laws, Julie Bishop giving billions away, the Chinese buying all your land, Canada buying fivefold the land holdings in the last 12 months. There's so many things going on around you. NT murder cop leaves the NT without having to face bail over the phone. I mean, that's a unique and interesting one that will crack the egg for all of what I'm talking about, given that this officer took an oath foreign to your constitution, making him a foreign power at war, making his action a war crime. Technical, isn't it? So, something you might want to look at. And the Attorney General, Christian Porter, he knows. He's going to have to speak up at some point. And he's going to have to address that foundation. And his total lack of lineage back to it, demonstrating that he's not operating in the lineage of your forefathers, demonstrating that he's outside of your constitution, demonstrating that you have no obligation to listen to a word this man says and to treat him like a foreign power talking to you from the other side of a fence.